Right now, today, February 17th, 2026, American and Iranian diplomats are sitting across from each other in Geneva. On the surface, it looks like a breakthrough. Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. But here's the part that changes everything completely. While those diplomats talk, Iran is still actively digging underground. Satellite imagery confirms it. Dump trucks operating, excavation expanding, tunnels getting deeper every single week. And that fundamental contradiction is hanging over every single word being spoken inside that Geneva conference room today. Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One on Monday night, quote, "I don't think they want the consequences of not making a deal." He went further. He said, quote, "We could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential." Past tense. Could have had a deal. As in, last time, talks failed and America dropped bombs on Iran's nuclear sites. The message to Tehran is unmistakable. Negotiate now, or the B-2 stealth bombers will stage for another round of strikes. That is the ultimatum hanging over Geneva today. Deal or strike. And every Iranian diplomat in that room understands it completely. But here's what makes this story far more complex than a simple ultimatum and a straightforward diplomatic response to it. Iran's Foreign Minister Araghchi posted on X just yesterday, quote, "I am in Geneva with real ideas to achieve a fair and equitable deal." And then, in the very next sentence on that same post, he wrote, "What is not on the table? Submission before threats." Read those two statements together carefully. Real ideas for a deal. And simultaneously, we will not submit under pressure. What this suggests is that Iran didn't come to Geneva to surrender. It came to negotiate from a position it believes is genuinely stronger now. And the reason Iran believes that, it's not diplomatic leverage, it's not economic pressure, it's geography, it's rock, it's depth underground. Let's go back 8 months, June 22nd, 2025. Operation Midnight Hammer, the most significant American military action in the Middle East in decades. 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flew, the longest B-2 combat mission since the Afghanistan campaign back in 2001. Historic by any measure. 14 of the most powerful conventional bombs ever deployed in combat, the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, 30,000 pounds each, fell on 3 Iranian nuclear sites. The targets were Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. According to CBS News and Pentagon briefings, it was the first time the MOP had ever been used in actual combat. Trump announced the sites were completely and totally obliterated. Secretary Hegseth called it a landmark moment in military history. But the satellite imagery told a more complicated story, and the analysts who study it professionally reached a very different conclusion. According to NPR's reporting, citing David Albright, president of the Institute for Science and International Security, the strikes caused serious, real damage. But Albright said something that should stop you cold. Quote, "I think you have to assume that significant amounts of enriched uranium still exist. This is not over by any means." Why? Because the day before the strikes, commercial satellite images showed trucks at the tunnel entrances of Fordo and Natanz doing something very specific. They were sealing the tunnels, loading material, hauling it away from the sites before a single American bomb had fallen. One would assume that any enriched uranium stocks were hauled away, Albright told NPR. Iran saw the strikes coming, and Iran moved the most critical asset first. According to the IAEA's own assessment, confirmed by Vice President J.D. Vance in the days after the strikes, Iran still possesses approximately 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. To translate that into plain terms, 60% purity is one short technical step from 90%, which is weapons grade. That 400 kilograms is enough for roughly 10 nuclear bombs. That material was not at Fordo or Natanz when the bombs hit. It had already been moved, and as of today, nobody publicly knows exactly where it is. According to CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, in a November 2025 satellite analysis, Iran never stopped building its next nuclear site, 1 mile south of Natanz, a site analysts call Pickaxe Mountain. Construction began in 2023, before any strike, before any diplomatic breakdown. And according to CSIS analysts, the new facility is designed to be more deeply buried than Fordo itself. The site it took 12 bunker buster bombs to seriously damage. Deeper than Fordo. In a mountain, 1 mile from the ruins of Natanz, still under active construction while diplomats negotiate in Geneva today. In my view, this is the core story that Geneva's public diplomacy is deliberately obscuring for all sides involved. The real question isn't what percentage of enrichment Araghchi will agree to. The real question is what Iran has already moved underground, and what can actually reach it. Because by the time any deal is signed and inspectors are theoretically allowed back in, what will they actually be able to see? What will they be able to verify? What is Iran hiding underground right now while Witkoff negotiates above ground? That is the question this entire story is built around. If this kind of analysis is what you've been looking for, drop a comment below telling me what you think Iran's real goal is in Geneva right now. And if this reached you before the mainstream coverage did, helps this analysis get to more people who need to understand what's actually happening here. Because in part 2, we're going inside Pickaxe Mountain, and the numbers about what's buried there will completely reframe how you see this entire standoff. Let's talk about the mountain itself, because until you understand what Pickaxe Mountain actually is, nothing about Geneva makes sense. The official name is Ku'e Kolangazla. It sits in the Zagros mountain range in central Iran, roughly 1.6 kilometers directly south of Natanz. According to the Institute for Science and International Security, the main peak sits at 1,608 meters above sea level. That number is critical. The mountain housing Fordo, the site that absorbed 12 MOP bunker buster bombs in June 2025, stood at only about 960 meters tall. Pickaxe Mountain is over 650 meters taller than Fordo, more than 50% taller, and Fordo's already survived 12 of the most powerful conventional bombs ever used in combat. ISIS President David Albright wrote in a previous report, quote, "Fordo is already viewed as so deeply buried that it would be difficult to destroy via aerial attack." He then added, "The new Natanz site may be even harder to destroy." That statement was written before Iran began its post-strike hardening operations, before the concrete pours, before the layered armor. Construction at Pickaxe Mountain began in 2020, 5 full years before Operation Midnight Hammer, 5 years before a single bomb fell on Iranian nuclear infrastructure. Iran publicly described the project as a replacement centrifuge assembly plant, built after a 2020 sabotage fire destroyed the original above-ground assembly hall at Natanz. That explanation is technically possible. But according to CSCS analysts Joseph Bermudez and Joseph Rogers in their November 2025 report, the dimensions don't match a simple assembly plant. The facility is estimated at 260 to 330 feet underground, the same depth range as Fordo, or potentially deeper, with tunnels extending west, east, and south through the mountain. Spencer Ferragasso, a senior research fellow at ISIS, was direct about what those dimensions actually imply about the facility's intended purpose. Quote, "Given the size of the spoil piles and the amount of construction, it wouldn't be incomprehensible to see them establish an enrichment facility inside it. Not storage, not assembly, an active enrichment facility underground, in a mountain taller than anything Iran has ever built nuclear infrastructure beneath. And here's where the February 10th satellite imagery, published just 7 days ago by ISIS analysts Sarah Burkhardt and Spencer Ferragasso, becomes the most important data point in this story. According to that ISIS report, high-resolution imagery shows Iran is actively pouring fresh concrete on top of the Western Tunnel entrance extension as of February 10th, 2026. At the eastern entrance, engineers have pushed back rock and soil, leveled it on top of the tunnel portal, and added what ISIS calls a concrete reinforced headworks structure. That headwork system allows additional layers of rock, soil, or concrete to be stacked on top of the tunnel entrance, layer by layer, absorbing and deflecting blast energy from above. In plain terms, Iran is building armor directly on top of its tunnel entrances, engineered specifically to survive a direct hit from a bunker buster bomb. According to ISIS, the site currently hosts dump trucks, cement mixers, backhoes, and truck-mounted cranes operating simultaneously across the complex. This is full-scale military-grade hardening. Now here is the engineering logic driving all of this, and it is devastatingly straightforward when you actually put the numbers side by side. The GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator penetrates approximately 200 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating. Against natural granite rock, the penetration depth is measurably less. Pickaxe Mountain sits at an estimated 260 to 330 feet underground. Even without any extra hardening above it, the MOP's detonation point falls short of the deepest operational areas, and the gap is not a small one. We are talking about a margin that existing available weapons cannot reliably bridge under current conditions. Now add the concrete headworks Iran is currently pouring, add the layered rock and soil burial being installed right now, add the 1,608-meter mountain sitting above all of it. What Iran is building is a facility calculated to sit precisely below the threshold where America's most powerful available conventional bomb loses its ability to cause reliable destruction. According to CSIS's November analysis, Iran built a complete security wall around the entire perimeter of Pickaxe Mountain after the June strikes. That wall is visible in satellite imagery comparing June 30th images against September 30th imagery, constructed in under 3 months. According to the same CSIS report, that wall is being expanded into what analysts describe as a double perimeter, a wall, then a fence behind it, with a surveillance zone between them. In my view, you don't build a double security perimeter around a centrifuge assembly plant. You build it around something you genuinely cannot allow to be inspected, approached, or independently verified. According to CSIS, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi has explicitly threatened that Iran could withdraw entirely from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The NPT is the foundational international agreement that legally obligates member states like Iran to allow IAEA inspectors full access to their nuclear facilities. CSIS analysts drew an explicit and sobering historical parallel in their November report. North Korea remains the only country to have ever withdrawn from the NPT. After withdrawing, North Korea built its entire nuclear weapons program underground, in complete darkness, with zero international monitoring of any kind. The timing of Garibabadi's NPT withdrawal threat, made while Pickaxe Mountain's tunnel entrances are being actively hardened with concrete, does not appear to be a coincidence. But here's the detail that fundamentally shifts what we think Pickaxe Mountain is actually being prepared for. And it comes from what Iran did in the 72 hours before the first bomb fell last June. According to analysts cited by NPR and the Washington Post, commercial satellite imagery from June 21st, the day before the strikes, showed transport vehicles moving material away from Fordo and Natanz. Tunnel entrances were being sealed from the inside. According to David Albright's post-strike assessment, Iran almost certainly moved significant portions of its enriched uranium before a single bomb fell. The entire operation was deliberate, clearly pre-planned, and completed hours before the B-2 stealth bombers had even entered Iranian airspace on their approach. That means Iran's 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium, enough material for roughly 10 nuclear weapons, was deliberately relocated before the strike and survived completely intact. As of today, February 17, 2026, not a single IAEA inspector has been allowed to confirm the current physical location of that enriched material. According to Iran International, Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi confirmed to Parliament in October 2025 that IAEA inspectors have not been granted access to any site damaged in the June conflict. 8 months. 0 inspections at Fordo, Natanz, or Isfahan. 0 verification of what survived underground. 0 confirmed location of that 400-kilogram enriched uranium stockpile. And Pickaxe Mountain, the one facility never struck, the one site growing deeper and harder every week, has never been visited by a single international inspector. Not when tunneling began in 2020, not after June's strikes accelerated construction, not today, while concrete is actively being poured on its entrances. What this suggests is a comprehensive, deliberate strategy that goes well beyond simply rebuilding what was physically damaged during Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025. Iran is constructing an entirely new nuclear architecture, designed from the ground up to be bomb-resistant, satellite-obscured, and structurally inspector-proof all at once. And the diplomats meeting in Geneva today are attempting to negotiate a verifiable agreement about a program that, by its physical design, may already be structurally impossible to fully verify. In Part 3, we get to the specific technical numbers that the B-2 bomber crews currently staged at Diego Garcia are actively being briefed on, and why the gap between what those bombers physically carry today and what Iran is actively building underground is getting measurably wider every single day. Here is the number that defines this entire standoff right now, today, 2,358 miles, the shortest distance between Iran and Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is a small British territory sitting in the middle of the Indian Ocean, a runway, a lagoon, and a strategically critical U.S. military base. Right now, according to Warzone satellite imagery confirmed by Planet Labs, it has B-2 Spirit stealth bombers parked visibly on the open tarmac. The total U.S. fleet of B-2 Spirit bombers stands at exactly 20 aircraft. That is the complete global inventory, not just in the region, but worldwide. According to Warzone reporting, a substantial portion of that entire fleet is currently forward deployed at Diego Garcia, staged within direct striking distance of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. To put that in plain strategic terms, America has quietly positioned a significant fraction of its only aircraft capable of carrying the MOP bunker buster within reach of Tehran's most protected sites. And here is what makes Diego Garcia uniquely valuable. At 2,358 miles away, Iran sits well within the B-2's unrefueled combat range of nearly 7,000 miles. But from its own soil, Iran cannot reach back. According to Warzone analysis, Iran's current ballistic missile arsenal cannot reliably reach the island when launched from Iranian territory. Diego Garcia sits just beyond the operational range of Iran's standard missile systems. This asymmetry is entirely deliberate, and it is the strategic point of the entire deployment. The B-2s can reach Iran. Iran cannot reach the B-2s from home. Diego Garcia is, for now, a one-directional threat. Every strategic planner in Tehran understands exactly what that means. Now, let's talk about what those B-2s are actually carrying, because the math of bombs versus mountain is where this story becomes genuinely uncomfortable. Each B-2 carries exactly 2 GBU-57B massive ordnance penetrator bombs per sortie, just 2 per flight due to the weapon's sheer physical size, 20.5 feet long and 30,000 pounds each. According to the War Zone, the B-2 is currently the only aircraft in the entire U.S. inventory that is operationally certified to carry the MOP, not the B-52, not the F-35, not any other platform. So the math is simple and stark. 6 B-2s at Diego Garcia multiplied by 2 MOPs each equals 12 bombs total, 12 shots at Iran's deepest underground nuclear infrastructure. And here's the scarcity problem that almost nobody is publicly discussing right now. According to War Zone reporting, the total global MOP stockpile is, quote, relatively small. The June 2025 strikes on Fordo and Natanz consumed 14 of those bombs in a single night. 14 MOPs, used in one operation, against sites that were not completely destroyed. After Operation Midnight Hammer, the U.S. placed a new contract with Boeing to replenish MOP inventory. According to Army Recognition's 2026 reporting, that contract value exceeds $100 million. But deliveries under that contract are not scheduled to begin until January 2028. That is nearly 3 full years after the original bombs were consumed in a single night of strikes. The replacement next-generation MOP, designed to penetrate deeper than the current version, is still in prototype development. Not deployed, not operational. It is being tested somewhere in a laboratory right now, while Pickaxe Mountain's tunnel entrances are actively being poured with reinforced concrete on February 10, 2026. This means the 12 MOPs at Diego Garcia are not just America's first option against Pickaxe Mountain. In practical terms, they are the only available conventional option for the foreseeable future. In my view, this stockpile constraint is the single most underreported strategic fact in this standoff. Everyone asks whether the B-2s will fly. Almost nobody asks what happens to American global deterrence if those bombers fly. And some of the 12 bombs detonate in the wrong tunnels. Because missing here doesn't mean a bomb lands in the wrong field. It means a MOPI detonates against a decoy shaft at Pickaxe Mountain, and that weapon is simply gone, irreplaceable for years. And Iran has been observed sealing multiple tunnel entrances, some of which analysts believe may be precisely those kinds of decoys, engineered to waste a limited, irreplaceable stockpile. According to War Zone, quote, questions have been raised about whether certain underground facilities in Iran might be beyond the reach of MOPI, or at least safe from complete destruction. Beyond the reach, safe from complete destruction. These are the careful words serious defense analysts use when they are describing exactly the scenario developing at Pickaxe Mountain. And if that technical assessment is accurate, the 12 MOPs at Diego Garcia may represent not just a limited stockpile, but a physically insufficient one against the target they are staged to destroy. Now here is what Iran is watching very carefully through its own satellite access, and it changes the risk calculation for both sides entirely. According to War Zone reporting, the B-2s at Diego Garcia are parked on open tarmac, fully exposed on the flight line without hardened aircraft shelters. They are fully visible to every commercial satellite operator, and therefore to Iranian intelligence services in real time on a daily basis. Aircraft sitting openly and unprotected on a runway are vulnerable to any long-range precision strike that can physically reach the island. And while Iranian missiles cannot currently reach Diego Garcia from their own soil, War Zone notes Iran has commissioned vessels capable of launching ballistic missiles from open ocean positions. If those vessels moved into the Indian Ocean, shifting the effective launch point hundreds of miles closer, the calculus changes entirely. The B-2s that are unreachable from Tehran would become potentially reachable from the sea. A staging ground assumed to be safe begins to look considerably less so. What this suggests is that America's operational window at Diego Garcia exists today, but it is not a permanent condition, and it may not look the same 12 months from now. Iran is watching the satellite images of Diego Garcia just as carefully as American analysts are watching the images of Pickaxe Mountain. In Part 4, we get to the verification trap. Why every deal being discussed in Geneva today contains a structural flaw that Pickaxe Mountain makes physically impossible to close. Here is the core structural problem that every negotiator sitting in Geneva today is fully aware of, and that no one can solve at a conference table. On July 2nd, 2025, just 10 days after Operation Midnight Hammer, Iran's parliament passed a law formally suspending all cooperation with the IAEA, not reducing cooperation, not restricting access to specific sites, suspending cooperation entirely by domestic law with immediate effect. By the end of June 2025, according to the IAEA's own official report, the agency had already withdrawn every single one of its inspectors from Iran for safety reasons. Since June 13, 2025, the IAEA has not conducted a single verification activity at any safeguarded nuclear facility in Iran, with one exception, the civilian Bushehr power plant. That means 8 months of zero independent verification, zero confirmed location of the 400-kilogram enriched uranium stockpile, zero access to Fordo, Natanz, or Isfahan, and zero access to Pickaxe Mountain, which, critically, was never inspected by any international inspector even before the strikes began, not once in any year of its construction. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi was direct about this in an interview at UN headquarters in October 2025. Quote, "The nuclear material enriched at 60% is still in Iran." He then added, "We need to go back there and confirm that the material is there and it's not being diverted to any other use." And then, this is very, very important. Those words, very, very important. From the head of the world's nuclear watchdog, about 400 kilograms of near weapons-grade uranium with an unconfirmed location carry real weight. And the situation deteriorated further after October. According to the Washington Post, Iran signed an agreement in September 2025 in Cairo allowing IAEA inspectors to return to non-bombed sites. Then, on November 20th, 2025, Iran canceled that agreement, the same day that the IAEA board passed a resolution demanding precise information about enriched uranium stockpiles without delay. Iran's response to a formal request for transparency was to immediately cancel the transparency agreement it had signed just 2 months earlier. That sequence says everything. Now here is what makes today's Geneva talks structurally different from every previous round of Iran nuclear diplomacy over the past 2 decades. According to the IAEA's own May 2025 report, published before any strike, the agency admitted it had already lost continuity of knowledge of the state of Iran's nuclear program. Before the bombs fell, before the inspectors were expelled, before the domestic law was passed, the verification gap was already there. The strikes simply made it impossible to ignore. What this suggests is that any new deal negotiated in Geneva today cannot simply restore the old verification framework that existed before June 2025. It would need to rebuild verification entirely from scratch, for a program Iran has spent years deliberately and systematically obscuring. In my view, this is the deepest structural problem in these talks. Both sides can agree on enrichment percentages and centrifuge counts, but an agreement is only as solid as the verification behind it. And right now, that verification mechanism has been formally suspended by Iranian law, the same law Iran would need to repeal before a single IAEA inspector could walk back into any facility. According to the Institute for National Security Studies, Iran faces a genuine and deeply uncomfortable structural dilemma at this precise moment. Remaining in the NPT legally requires inspection cooperation, but Iran's own parliament passed a law making exactly that cooperation illegal inside the country. Withdrawing from the NPT entirely would be an explicit admission of nuclear weapons intent, and would immediately change the international legal basis for a military strike against Iran. So Iran is effectively trapped. It cannot fully comply without overturning its own law. It cannot withdraw without triggering the strike it has spent years trying to prevent. The Geneva talks are Iran's attempt to find a third path, a deal that preserves nominal NPT membership, without restoring the kind of deep verification that would actually answer the critical questions. According to today's Geneva reporting, the format remains indirect. Oman mediating, messages shuttled between rooms, no direct American-Iranian dialogue in the same space. The official agenda covers enrichment ceilings, centrifuge parameters, and IAEA access modalities. But the core positions remain structurally opposite. The U.S. demands zero enrichment inside Iran. Iran says enrichment is a sovereign right that is non-negotiable under any circumstances, at any time, with any partner. Those two positions are not merely far apart. They are pointing in opposite directions. And behind both of them sits Pickaxe Mountain, still being built, tunnels still going deeper. The IAEA's Grossi noted in October that inspectors had detected movement around the sites where the stockpiles are stored. Not enrichment activity, movement, relocation, to where he could not say. Without physical access inside those facilities, no external party can determine where Iran's 400 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium actually is today, or what it is being used for. What this means is that a deal could theoretically be signed in Geneva, sanctions could be lifted, and inspectors could return, and still leave the most critical questions permanently unanswered. Because those questions have a physical answer, not a diplomatic one. And the physical answer is buried somewhere inside mountains that inspectors have never entered, and may never be permitted to enter. That is what makes today, February 17th, 2026, genuinely and structurally different from every previous chapter in this 20-year standoff. The bombs have already fallen. The inspectors have been expelled by domestic law. The underground facility is under active construction as of this week. The enriched material is unaccounted for, and the diplomats are negotiating in Geneva today while dump trucks work at Pickaxe Mountain. Two parallel tracks, running simultaneously, in full view of satellite imagery, moving in completely opposite directions at the same time. And the gap between them, measured not in diplomatic language, but in meters of excavated rock, keeps growing, one dump truck at a time.